Yeah. So in terms of, so nag-isip ako, so the way I wanted to answer this question is I wanted to anchor it on a framework just so that it's easier to um, I guess to recall. So I'm going to try and do that. Yan, sige. So back in I think 1996, there was a group called the Dolores Commission. 1996 ata, I think, yeah, 1996, and um, they came out with a report called the Dolores Report, which summarized, I guess, how what people should be learning and what education should be and what learning should be. And in that report, they outlined what they call the four pillars of learning. And when I went back to when I wanted to answer this question, I also wanted to use that framework, sort of put a structure on what the teachers should be learning. So according to that framework, um, there are four necessary skills that people should have in order to participate in this modern world. And that was back in 1996. It's learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. And I usually use this framework when I teach a class on 21st century skills or technology. Because when you ask for 21st century skills, there's a lot of frameworks there, from ISTE to DepEd to OECD. Um, I think even CIMEO Innotech might have a few 21st century learning frameworks. There's a lot. UNESCO has one, I think. So there's a lot of different 21st century learning frameworks. I really like the four pillars of Dolores, because even if 20 plus years after, those four pillars still hold true. And I think it might not be new skills per se that teachers need to have, but it might be the same skills but reimagined in a different context. So first would be learning how to know, learning to know. And it talks about basically um, the skills needed for people in order to gather information so that they can learn more, whether it's new content or new knowledge or new skills. And with the pandemic now, teachers have to do a lot more self-paced learning, just as what their students are. Teachers need to learn how to know whether their teaching strategies are effective in this new context. So they have to know how to assess their learning experiences, their lectures, their materials, their environments in a very quick and easy way. It might not doesn't have to be action research, even doesn't even have to be full-blown researchers. It could just be simple um, points or simple indicators that they say that um, I know that my class is effective, or I know that my class is that strategy was not effective. It's also learning how to know more. So it's about learning how to know more about the subject that you're teaching, whether it's doing self-paced learning, self-paced training, doing MOOCs, doing online training, doing joining peer groups, etc. Being more metacognitive as a teacher, knowing what your skills are and what your gaps are, etc. I think that's very important. So within this context, how can you? One question that I want teachers to ask is, within this new normal, whatever it looks like, whether you are in a rural area or in a highly urbanized area, whether you're in a high resource school or a low resource school, how can I? What are the things that I need to learn so that I can know more? Yeah, and I think that will be those are going to be different across contexts and different teachers. Second would be um, learning how to do. So it's very similar to that, where you have to have skills in order to apply things that you already know and put them into practice. So things like how to do intentional practice, um, how to teach basically, and learning how to do in the sense of what are the technology skills that you need to know so that you can implement the learning experiences that you have to do. So a big chunk here is actually technical skills. And unfortunately, for the many teachers who say, I'm not techie, I'm afraid of technology, it's not important, I really think it is. You don't have to learn how to code. You don't have to learn how to create robots. You don't have to learn how to create websites, but you do have to know how to navigate the online space and the digital space, because these are also spaces that your students are experiencing and they're navigating also. So it's understanding the intricacies of maybe the learning management system that their school is using or their system is using, knowing how to utilize the basic technology skills so that they can reach more students. Knowing that knowing what communication tools that they can use, even if it's just pen and paper, even if they have to send things by post. How do you use different media to convey your message better and to convey yourself as a teacher better? I think those are some skills that they have to consider. So as teachers, learning how to do it's basically that. It's learning how to what are the skills that you need to know or that you need to possess so that you can actually teach, so that you can perform, so that you can deliver learning experiences and you can implement those learning experiences. The third one is learning how to be. So this focuses on self-awareness. Who are you as a teacher? So understanding your teaching philosophy, understanding what you believe in, understanding your biases, your tendencies, your belief system, and understanding your strengths and possibly your weaknesses or your areas for improvement. Many, not just teachers, but I think many people found themselves having more time in the pandemic because they weren't commuting, they weren't leaving the house, they weren't socializing, so they found themselves having much more alone time with their selves, with their own self, with their own they found themselves having more alone time on their own. And some actually use that as a way to understand themselves better, to get to know themselves better. So whether it's journaling, whether it's looking back on your past work, whether it's documenting your teaching, whether it's asking feedback from other people, from your peers and colleagues, taking tests, taking assessments. You have to know how to know yourself better so that you can be. You don't necessarily just have to do. You can just be. So who you are as a person, what your beliefs are, those are very important skills that I think teachers right now also need to know. And I think it's particularly more important now because in the online space or in the remote learning space, it's hard to connect with. If you're a student, it's hard to connect with your teacher. You don't know who they are. You don't have as much contact time with them, and so people have to over communicate themselves. People have to say outright, "This is what I believe in. This is me. This is my teaching style. This is my strategy of how we're going to teach." Because it's not naturally picked up because we're not sharing the same space anymore. And so I think that's very important as teachers now, that they have to over-communicate. They have to say, who they are. They have to introduce themselves better. And I found myself doing that at the beginning of my semesters. I would share my teaching philosophy in a sense. What do I believe in? Who am I as a teacher? All of those things that normally maybe my students will pick up midway in the semester without me having to articulate it. So that's third. Fourth is knowing how to live together, and I think that's something that a lot of even society needs to do. Needs that more now. Basically, these are the skills that are necessary for people to coexist, to show respect to each other, to understand that they are not individuals only, but they're individuals at a part of a larger community, a larger system. And as teachers, we have to understand that. Sometimes it is also good for our well-being, because if we do not know how to teach with other people, or let's say we don't know how to live with with our students or with our peers, we don't consider them as connections, but we consider them as screens or as boxes on the screen, then it might lead to the feeling of disconnectedness or loneliness or lack of motivation. That's one trend that many people are seeing now in schools, is that they don't have the schools, the teachers, they all feel lonely. They all feel that they don't have a friend. They don't have those social connections, those social opportunities to even to talk and to be who they are. And so, um, socializing and also tolerance and empathy, because as you know, with when we use technology for learning, that also opens up the students and the teachers to more, um, I guess, more spaces for them to interact, whether it's social media or chat groups or any other platform. And the tendency of people is they tend to judge people just based on whatever they see on the other side of the screen, or whatever comments that they see on the other side of the screen. That's why you have a lot of these trolls being very successful and their business is very thriving, because they can manipulate the feelings of the people quite quite fast if they just say the right things, or if they do the right, if they post the right pieces of content. But as teachers, we have to learn how to live together. That doesn't necessarily being tolerant of all everything, even hate speech, but it's having that knowledge of how the system works, and having the knowledge that um, as having the knowledge that you are part of something bigger, and whatever actions you do as a teacher might have consequences. And it's also very important for you to take perspectives and to understand that the perspectives of your students are very important when you, let's say, design a class. When you have to understand that when working with other teachers, let's say you're collaborating on lesson plans, you have to know how to take their perspectives also, and how to understand how to do proper collaboration. um, yeah. So the question there would be, how can teachers become better at learning together while they're still physically distant, but together in other spaces like digital spaces, or shared time spaces, if you will. So I think having those four questions might help frame that question better, and might help teachers think of necessary skills or competencies that they need in order to navigate this new normal. Yeah.
Ang ganda nung pagkaka-discuss mo. Kasi context, itong video na to, ito yung last na video for the entire course. Tapos dun sa...
Shucks, pressure.
Na-pressure ka ba? Pero dun sa pagkaka-discuss mo ng 4 pillars, parang na-synthesize mo from
that's good.
lesson 1
Mabuti.
up to the last.
Whew.
Ang galing, may pang-synthesize na. Anyway, pero another thing that's interesting is yung ito, di ba, updated Guro 21 siya. So the
Yeah.
old version of the Guro 21 is actually naka